Hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar, the Azim Premji University webinar series. Today we are talking to Fawaz and Seema, and the topic for today's webinar is how to be a full-time writer in India. Seema is faculty at the university where her research focuses on the role of nature in Indian cities in addressing the challenges of environmental sustainability and social justice. She is also the co-author of Cities and Canopies, Trees in Indian Cities, by Penguin, and So Many Leaves by Pratham. Uh, she would be hosting the webinar and talking to Fawaz. The audience, if you have any questions, please post them in the comment section and we'll try to include them in the second half of the webinar. Welcome, Seema. Take it. Over to you.
Thank you, Nikhil. And Fawaz, hello. It is really my pleasure to talk to Fawaz today, who's an alumni of the Azim Premji University. Fawaz has many avatars. He has worked with NGOs, he has worked with government institutions, and his avatars as a writer include writing fiction, non-fiction, and more recently, his genre has been crime thrillers. So that's a very, very brief introduction, but I will ask Fawaz to give a much detailed background to how his motivations and how he came about to being a writer from and what he saw were his main the important points in his life which made him want to be a writer. Over to you, Fawaz, and welcome once again.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Nikhil. Very generous introduction, I must say. Well, I'll keep it short. For me, I actually grew up in Bahrain, did my schooling there, came to Chennai for my undergrad in journalism from Madras Christian College. Along that, worked with a couple of media organizations along with college, including NDTV and the Hindu, the newspaper. And then, of course, joined Azim Premji University for my master's. Must say, a life-changing experience. Interestingly, started writing when I was at Azim University, so that I definitely owe that to the college. Post that, started working in the public health domain for a while, then moved on to government consulting in Delhi and across India for a while, and then worked in marketing and communications with fintechs and edtechs for the last 5 to 6 years after the public health experience. Through this period, I just tried writing, started with short stories firstly at APU itself, and then, of course, over the time when I was working and everything else, the interest gripped in. I would not say crime is my favorite genre. I'm more of a market-driven writer, so did a proper market research and arrived at the fact that probably crime thrillers would be the best for a first-time author. Hence, dwelled into that. The book did fine well, I think, and then have another release coming up in October this year, the second part, and have something else coming up next year, 2024, the third book. So briefly, that's the introduction. So yeah.
Thanks, Fawaz. That's quite prolific for a writer to come up with a book almost every year now.
Thank,
With you
thank you.
maybe reading a few lines from either the a book, anything that you choose from your own writing, just to give people a flavor of the way you write.
So interestingly, in thrillers, we don't do a lot of readings because, like, generally, people feel that thrillers can anything can be a giveaway. And since I moved on from the first book and I have a release in October, I'll read something from the one that's not yet released. I'll keep it short. So this is something which is going to be released, and it's the second part of my first book. So I'll start. In the militants' camp, more than 24 hours had passed since any semblance of food had reached their starving bellies. The absence of their fellow soldiers who had ventured into the village to investigate the disrupted supply only added to the growing sense of unease. Banjour, weakened by hunger, lay on the makeshift bunk, his eyes betraying his desperation. The camp leader Nahum approached him, a tinge of remorse etched on his face, towards his prized guest whose protection was entrusted with him. "I'm sorry, sir, this has never happened before," Nahum said. Banjour, his stomach rumbling, looked up at Nahum. His hunger-induced frustration was evident in his voice. "Are those people who went looking for our food supplies back yet?" Nahum replied, "No, I have sent some more people to find them." This seems like a trap. Before Banjur could voice his concerns about the situation, a thunderous explosion shattered the stillness. The deafening explosion ripped through the camp, engulfing the surroundings in a blaze of fury. Flames danced hungrily, devouring everything in its path. Panic etched itself onto the faces of Nagam and Banjur as they witnessed the horrifying sight of two militants being torn into shreds by the relentless onslaught of the bombs. The shock of the unexpected assault paralyzed them for a moment, their eyes widening in disbelief. As chaos ensued in the camp, the militants scrambled desperately to salvage what they could from the wreckage. The crackling fire cast eerie shadows, amplifying the sense of urgency and fear that permeated the air. With smoke billowing around them, they grabbed their weapons, ammunition, and any supplies within their reach. The movements were frenzied, driven by a primal instinct to survive. Amid the swirling chaos, the militants made their decision. Realizing the precariousness of the situation, they made a split second choice to abandon their temporary stronghold. Their eyes darted in every direction, searching for an escape route. With hearts pounding, they raced downhill, their footsteps echoing against the rugged terrain. Amidst the smoke and flames, the police seized the opportunity to regroup and launch a fierce pursuit of the retreating militants. Johann, his mind slowly focused on capturing Banjur, led the charge with unwavering determination. His heart thumped in his chest, a mix of adrenaline and purpose coursing through his veins. The militants, their retreat turned into a desperate escape, fired haphazardly in a last ditch attempt to fend off their pursuers. But their shots lacked precision and planning, veering into the night sky. Nahum, caught in the chaos, fired his weapon, unintentionally striking a fellow policeman who fell to the ground, blood seeping from his chest. I'll stop with that. So, usually, these things have a lot of dialogues and everything. So, it was very difficult to pick up a portion where there were little dialogues. But yeah,
Great.
this is basically from the Johann Titler series, which is the first book, and this is the second part, which is set in Maharashtra, Assam, and a bit of West Bengal.
Great. So, for anybody watching, that was a little teaser into what Fawaz's next book will be, and something to get you interested to pick it up when it's out. So we've received a lot of interest for this webinar and we got a lot of questions. So what we've also tried to do and we've tried to do through the webinar is we tried to weave in some of the questions into the discussion that Fawaz and I will have. So let me start. One of the very popular questions, I think many of them asked was, how do you go about writing? How do you start this process of writing? So Fawaz, can you tell us what is your process in terms of when you want to write?
I think both of us should talk about it because I primarily write fiction and Seema writes non-fiction. But for me, see, so I personally, like, when people ask this question, I say there are three kinds of ways that people generally write based on what I've interacted with fellow writers and everything else. One is somebody who takes an outline approach, which is basically you have your entire story in terms of like for example, you pick up one specific issue or one specific or a series of issues that you want to pick on, and then you of course uh, outline your chapters, and then you of course flesh it out later, and then your characters come in, like there is a conflict and multiple conflicts probably, then your characters come in and things like that. A second approach I've seen people take is something like building a character's journey. Like the story might be focused on one character, it could be anything, right, something as simple as what do you say, a family relationship or romance, or it could be somebody's journey into awakening or whatever, but if the entire lens is narrated through the character's journey. So then you build the situations that, unlike the first case, you build situations and surroundings nearing them. And quickly, the third one is basically a free flow writer who basically has a, what do you say, has a germ of an idea, and then you go with the flow. You don't probably you don't have everything defined in place, but you explore the story as you go with it. So I am more of like the first kind of writer. For me, more than the characters, it is the setting, the place, the issues, the conflicts, the premise that matters more for me. So I will flesh out, and before I start writing completely, I'd obviously do like spend like 2 to 3 months in for research. So could be like right from newspaper articles to browsing through your EPWs, your JSTORs, to even books and other things in the same space. So then once I have enough, once I've acquired enough knowledge about that, this thing probably, if it's, so most of the things that I write is a mix of fiction and non-fiction. So while the entire, the premise might be fictional, it's based on real life events. So hence, if these are events, especially they're not being talked about much in mainstream commercial fiction, I try to, of course, set up interviews or meetings with people who have lived through those times. So that might involve it could be as simple as like a Google Meet call or a phone call, to in some cases even go into the city, because you might, for example, you're talking about a time like a book I'm writing about is basically set in the 1970s in Calcutta, 2022. So people who have lived before that, it's not difficult. It's not easy for them to have a conversation, especially an open conversation, probably over the phone. So you go to their place, you visit them, and then you talk about the spaces. So for me, first identify the topics or everything, and especially because it's crime, the first thing that I probably what I arrive at is the motive of why this murder has happened, because I feel that the most important gratification crime enthusiast needs is a strong motive, and of course then the modus operandi, and then of course what do you say, build out your characters. Of course it helps that if you're thinking a little commercial, you build your characters in certain way, you see that okay, this is not a one book or a standalone book. You want to build a series, which is what I had thought of like a 5-book series when I started Johan. So of course there is a journey that these characters will go through. Like they might start off as young people in investigation. They grow over a period of time, not just in the first book, but as the character progresses. And of course there are a set of few what do you say, permanent characters that will always be there throughout the book. So the investigating officers, the government officials, because it's a crime, this thing. And of course there are some recurring characters who are not probably as prominent, but they have certain significance. This could be informants, columnists, reporters, and
Okay,
based on the
so
setting, the rest of the 70. Yeah, yes, Eva.
Fawaz, no, you froze for a bit, so we were just wondering. Can you just repeat the last maybe couple of sentences that you said?
Sure. So I was saying that, so basically, apart from the permanent characters who will be, reprised across the other next set of books, there'll be a couple of recurring characters who might not be as prominent. They might be journalists, informants, or things like that. So they will obviously have a certain amount of presence. And of course, then because it's a crime, it's a murder mystery or like a political thriller of sorts, right? So the premises are different. The first one for me was set in Bihar and Begusarai. The second one is set in Assam and Maharashtra. So the third one is in Calcutta. So of course, based on the politics there, settings and the premise or topic I am talking about, that will change, of course. And being a thriller, there'll be a lot of red herrings. So of course, you have to plug all of them. You can't have a single point journey. There has to be a bit of confusion for the readers also, trying to bit of keeping them guessing, which is important. So of course, and a few subplots here and there, definitely. So essentially, yeah, that is kind of the process.
So you make it sound very easy, but we all know that writing is quite can be quite tedious. So I just quickly wanted to ask, how do you have like a specific time in the day you write, or how is your what is your writing? Do you have a methodology or discipline in writing, or is it just I feel like writing today, I'll write?
So like I said, for me it's the timelines matter a lot for me. And then of course all of us enter this thing called writer's block, which is the scariest phase that you can be as a writer. My funda is simple. I write 1,000 words every day. It might not be part of the book, it might not be part of whatever I'm writing, but that's the only way I can what do you say, fight that onslaught. You'll feel lazy, right? You don't want to, sometimes you don't want to write. Sometimes you're like, you have a lot of things to do. So I write 1,000 words a day, and I usually prefer writing it late in the night, because that's when all the inspiration comes. Somehow I think the night and the crime genre have some sort of weird relationship going on, so it works.
Yeah, each to their own, I guess. So you are also working now. You're full time. You have a job. So
Yeah.
how do you manage your time, publishing deadlines with your full time work?
So the funny thing for me is, if, for example, I can't write on weekends. The day when I have probably a complete free flow window to write, I can't write. If I have a probably busy day at work, it's more inspiring for me to write, honestly. Because you're like, it's like a machine, right? You're kind of already what do you say? You've already done some work for the day. You're prepped in that zone. You don't have to start completely afresh. So it's that doesn't really affect me in that sense. And deadlines of course have to be honored, because otherwise you can understand the contracts, the timelines. See, for example, since I write specifically murder mysteries, the political setting, for me, like, for example, if I have a deadline, if the whole window where we have 4 to 5 elections coming towards the end of September, October, that's a window I need, which will be great for my book sales. Or like 2024 national elections work because there is a political premise. So I have to follow deadlines because those are the timelines I want my books to release in. So a full-time job for me personally, as I said, it's a 1,000 words per day thing I do. I'll make time. It could be mostly it's after work somewhere between 11 to 2 or 11 to 3, or some good days when I wake up in the morning it could be between 5 to 8. So that's not a problem. And constantly thinking when you're traveling, especially if you're between Bombay and Bangalore traffic, you have enough time to think and read. So that works, I guess.
Yeah, true. So another question is, writing is one part of it. The tougher part is finding a publisher. And so, how does for fiction? How does that work? How did you go about finding? You wrote so I guess what the viewers will want to know is, those who are interested in writing, is how do they approach a publisher with their work?
Okay. So basically, what I believe in, just my opinion, I just feel that writing is just 30% of the work. 70% of the work actually begins after you finish writing it, right from landing a publisher to the marketing to the sales to whatever that follows. Because at the end of the day, India has a very crowded publishing market, and if you want to really sell or like make your mark, you really have to be good at the latter part of it also. Writing, of course, is important, not taking away from that. So, specifically in India, from a publishing point of view, there are three kinds of publishing, which, as you're aware of, Seema. Traditional publishing, there is, of course, hybrid publishing, and there is self-publishing. I personally prefer going for the first route because that channel is what has worked for me, but not taking away from hybrid or publish or self-pub. Just to quickly give a brief on what these are. Traditional publishing is where you, of course, land a contract with one of those publishers who basically take care of the entire thing, right from your publishing, ensuring the availability in bookstores to e-commerce sites to helping with a bit of marketing and things like that. And of course, you're given an advance for that, and then you have certain amount of royalties which follow. Hybrid is something where you and the publisher, of course, share the cost in terms of reaching the book to the audience, where you may not have to pay for the publishing aspect, but the what do you say the publishing house will not do any sort of marketing or any aspects of it. They'll expect you to be completely in charge of that. What they will, of course, do is they will just get the book published, get an ISBN number, put it in as many places, might not even be available in all bookstores. So then it's the author who has to take a responsibility of the entire marketing and this distribution aspect of it. And the third is self-publishing, and it's self-explanatory. It's where you, of course, pay a publisher to get your stuff published, in which, of course, right from the getting the whole thing published to everything, the author is spending money, which means you get higher royalties. It's not that that model doesn't work. There are authors who've made it work and then, of course, land a better contracts. But this is basically primarily the three this thing. My experience is more the traditional aspect of things, so I can speak more on that. It's simple in India, of course. As I said, it's a crowded market. It's not what do you say, something which is very easy to get a contract. Definitely, especially if you're looking at the top publishers or anybody to invest completely in you. So there are two ways to do. Of course, usually, first time authors, what they do is they find out these submission portals of all websites of all these publishing houses and send their proposals and then follow up and things like that. The other way is to actually approach through a literary agent. There are like good 10 to 11 ones in the country. You can do a simple Google search and you'll find a couple of articles on them. What literary agents specifically do is they once they like, so for literary agents also, it's as for a first time author, it's as tedious as applying to a publishing house. You have to send a proposal with, what do you say, synopsis, your character summaries, and sometimes even a marketing plan. The literary agent evaluates your proposal, and if sure he would like to sign you, they would get in touch, and then they represent your book to these top publishing houses. And of course, they earn a certain revenue out of it. So it's usually like a certain percentage on your advance that you get and a certain percentage on your royalty. In today's market, because rights and films have come in, some literary agents obviously ask for a share in that, but that's based on your negotiation pool and everything else. So yeah, so you of course can approach a literary agent. The only difference is that with a literary agent, you have a faster shot at reaching a publishing house because they have direct contacts, as opposed to you trying directly, because you're going to a generic email submission box where the chances are much more minimal. Doesn't mean that you won't get it. It's just that the chances are faster with a literary agent. And once I think a literary agent approves, and then they, of course, obviously make you work on several proposals which are sent to the publishing houses eventually. And once you get a contract, of course, the commercials I mentioned, the royalty cut, everything that is there. And once you secure the advance, then they plan for the release. Uh, like if you ask me what a timeline takes between a literary agent to getting a book outside, can vary anywhere from 6 months to 12, or even longer in some cases, depending on which genre you're writing in. So then they get it out there. And of course, a literary agent will help you with the marketing, the events, because events are very important for a writer. It could be book fairs, it could be talks, universities. So literary agent, gets you into these prime spots where you can sell. And of course, these book fairs usually have your major publications putting out their stalls or kiosks with your book sale. So what I have seen in my personal experiences, if you are going to say a book fair, and if you're available to a reader, you might not be you don't have to be a very known person, but if you're available to for a conversation, the chances of selling books are higher, as opposed to what you say, you not being there, because then the only reason that they are picking up your book, the first thing that a reader sees is your front cover, and then the blurb at the back. So, and things like that. So, and then of course that happens. But in today's channel, especially post COVID, a lot of sales don't happen only at bookstores. It happens also online. So it'll be good to have a good hang of what do you say, understanding. Of course, your performance marketing or like your digital marketing through Facebook and everything is important. Another important channel for sales is Amazon. So Amazon has its own advertising portal called AMS, Amazon Marketing Services. A quick 2 to 3 hours if you spend on what do you say, YouTube, you can easily learn what AMS. It's a very simple portal, but it helps because at the end of the day, you're investing a certain amount of money in these ads, right? Your publisher puts certain amount of things, but if you want to, breach those numbers, the traditional numbers, you obviously can invest yourself, and Amazon is a great platform for that. And once you see good sales, of course bookstores actually end up calling you. Of course your agent or your publisher helps with that, and then you can have book tours across the country. Like I'd done one in Bangalore, like we covered almost all bookstores of Sapna, and just doing a couple of ones in within Higginbottoms. It helps because at the end of the day, readers are curious, and then what do you say, you end up making a couple of sales in that regard. And of course another major aspect is getting your book reviewed by media, or getting it basically some amount of attention. See, media coverage may not guarantee you sales, but definitely for a person who's searching, heard about your book and is searching about it, definitely gets a certain amount of trust when they see that multiple media has covered you, or you are featured in that sense. That kind of helps in the buying behaviors of people. And then of course if you can land a contract for an adaptation, that's for fiction specifically, even for non-fiction, it kind of helps, of course, in the commercial aspect of it, because that way you can break even, or probably get a better ROI for what you have done. But this is specific from a fiction point of view. I think Seema will be better of explaining about non-fiction what the process is. It'll be good if we can hear from you also.
Yeah, thanks, Fawaz. So for non-fiction, which is also a follow-up question, but I'll kind of take it through this thing. So, for example, the book on trees that we wrote, for us, one of the biggest things that we had to see is what makes this book stand out. There are so many books on trees out there. Like you said, it's a crowded market, even in non-fiction nowadays. So what is the USP for our book? For which we have to do a lot of go back and look at the kind of books that have been published both in India and outside, then submit a proposal which includes the book proposal with an abstract of the chapters to the publisher. Also, then they give you a form, usually saying later, if the first draft of the proposal is okay, they give you a form saying, okay, can you fill this in? And that asks you questions about what are you targeting, which audience are you targeting, is the book targeting, which is the point at which we go through all the books, say, on trees that have been written, and say that these are the ones that are covered, and this is this particular thing that. So ours was pitched for a popular audience, and we also pitched it at that, it's we as we said, it's a khichdi of stories that we had tried to tell. It's not a one this thing. So these may be things that people already know, but it's put in a different way. And also the fact that it was written about cities, very specific to cities. And of course the publishers then work with us to put together. Our initial draft was, okay, we'll do 20 species, but that seemed boring. So they said, okay, do one species alternate chapter with a theme, and that seemed to have worked with us. So we kind of also work with the publisher on this. But coming back to this question of the crowded market, just like we in crime, in fiction, what do you think about Johann Titler series? What stood out for the publishers that was so different from what was out there? And was it a conscious thing that you did?
Yeah, I mean, like, actually, both. I think the positive and the negative of the book has been the fact that it's got a lot of politics, which is seen as like a positive, and a lot of politics is seen as a negative. Also, not a lot of audiences in the country, what do you say, prefer that. And second is, for me, what worked out basically was, what do you say, is a mix of fiction and non-fiction. So, like I said, like I did a bit of market research before, writing a book. And so I basically what do you say, found a couple of book marketing agencies, couple of readers, book clubs, kind of like secondhand books, so that I've got a good emailing list. Had a tie up with them, and like the questions were pretty simple. It's something like, what kind of books are you likely to pick up from a first time author if you haven't heard of the author, or this thing. So from that, this thing, I had a huge person who said that crime thrillers is something which they would pick up irrespective of the person who's writing it, if the premise is interesting, as opposed to, like, of course, something like a romance or literary fiction does work well, but the sheer chances of crime being picked up was higher based on the primary research I'd done there. And also, my publisher did give me some insights into the fact that, like, it worked out for them also that way. Like crime, they've seen, like, better pull in case it works out. So what worked for me especially was the mix of fiction and non-fiction. While the entire book is primarily a fictional setup, like like it's about the death of a young politician, but it's set in Begusarai. It is set between 1970 to 2022, where it goes through, like, things which have happened in Indian history. And then the idea of, like, weaving all these things into a fictional narrative is what I did. So when people read, and when they go and search, when they're curious, they know that these things have happened. Of course, the whole setting and the premise may be fictional, but these are real things that have happened. And generally, like this note, the reason of doing political thriller with a murder mystery was that did notice a void in the market. Like, there are a lot of crime, even crime and murder mysteries are also a crowded market. It's not that people are not doing it, but with political thrillers, not many people are there. Not many people who are consistently matlab, writing in that genre. So for me, that worked because that was easy to market from a point of view. Like, like something as simple as, like, if you want to like, Google is a huge channel, right? You want to make your availability, type top political thrillers or top Indian thriller authors, whatever, these search keywords that have, like, good volume and everything. To get my book placed there was easier for me. So that way, matlab, that niche really helped. Of course, it's possible that the fact that it had politics, a lot of people did not pick up. Also, like, I've got feedback when I went to, like, one of those book fairs where I was talking to people, and they were like, we like murder mysteries, but politics, no. I mean, it's generally a thing which people are like, we want to steer away from it, but that's okay. It is a risk that you take. For example, I will not like the Johann series will be marketed as like a political thriller series, whereas the other series that I've started, which will be marketed as proper murder mystery series, because I also want to test out what probably sells more. At the end of the day, I had target numbers. I want to hit this much, that I hit, and I was happy. And then it's about, like, what do you say, getting more and more sales. I mean, something very simple and interesting that I can tell you. Like, we figured that a lot of younger audiences don't pick up the books, like, probably like how millennials or people, older people pick up. So one thing we thought is probably because people don't want to read, like, these really fat books anymore. We thought, I mean, thrillers generally thick because they feel there's too much gravitas in it. But a younger audience wasn't picking it up. So we did something like a small product hack where we basically increase the length of the book and reduce the width of it, but making it seem like lesser number of pages, and put it on, like, airport bookstores and shelves to see if people pick up. That did work. We actually got, like, a certain amount of people picking it up. So at the end of the day, it's a lot of trying, and I use the word market and commercial writing a lot, because I feel in this crowded market that we are in, to stand out, you need to obviously have that hunger to, like, experiment. And something is that do not treat like your book like a baby. I don't treat it like a baby, because the problem you treat something like a baby is you don't tend to look beyond the flaws of that thing. I treat it like a product. So, if that there is feedback, there is criticism, I will take it. I don't mind, what do you say, optimizing it for better results. So that's again the approach and thought process I have.
Okay, since so I just want to take a moment to remind the people or folks who are watching to please put in your questions in the in the chat box in YouTube, and we'll take those towards the end. But now coming back to Fawaz, since you spoke about numbers,
Yeah.
how do you think? What is do you think that anyone can be a full time writer in India, and is that a monetarily something that they can do to be a full-time writer?
It's not probably possible with your first book onwards. I mean,
Hmm.
contrary to what people think, that like, you write a book, and like the general perception of that whole writing thing is like, you have a hit book. It could have sold n number of copies. Like, I have sold a good amount of copies, but that doesn't mean that that is the enough push enough to become a full time writer, because it's all about sustaining it. It could be it could be like a first time luck, and it cannot work again. So I think you can become a full. I don't think it's impossible to be a full time writer. There are a lot of people I know who are full time writers writing not just crime. I know somebody in horror genre who is a full time writer who has like 5 book contracts the next 2 years with the Penguins and the Rupas and everything, and he's doing it full time. And of course, there are I'm talking about like slightly like a mid range author. Of course, there are the what is the commercial authors who are doing it like a full time. So it's possible, but for that it's important that you build a brand for yourself, which is like the first thing that you do. uh, don't think of your first book as don't take the results of your first book as, what do you say, whether you become a full-time writer or not. Build the brand on the go. If you're earning money out of it, I would urge people to, like, put that money back into the book and the author's profile to brand it certain more. And of course, now with OTDs and everything rising, there is a demand for fiction, at least I know, and non-fiction also. Both have a demand with like, with OTDs picking up, with I think the audience also preferring like content driven, what do you say, content driven stuff, even for like the screens and the adaptation of the world. There are a lot of books being picked up in that space also. So there's a strong possibility that people can become a full-time author. But don't take your first book and take that plunge. Build your brand on the go, because that's ultimately, you want people to pick up your book not just because you have a great blurb or it sounds great, but people should also pick up because they like your kind of writing. And that is the only thing. That's It's like for any product, right? Just think about it. People buy certain products because they have established certain amount of loyalty towards that brand, and then they pick it up. So that's the same goes with writing also. It's while there are a lot of puritans who disagree with me, like, it is, what do you say, it's all about the content and what you want to drive. Of course, I am not taking away. I think the content is very important, but unfortunately we are in a market where you have to, what do you say, uh, be very market driven and be very commercial driven in that sense to become a full-time writer.
So I'm going to just pick one of the questions that has come, which was also one of the questions we wanted to ask you. This is
Okay.
about your book being turned, the digital rights of the book having been acquired for a series in an OTT platform. How did that happen, and how excited are you about it?
So like I think right place, right time, right product is what I will say. Uh, so obviously, like my book's name, the first book that's got picked up, it's called Nobody Likes an Outsider, and I'm an outsider. I have no contacts in this industry or whatever in that sense. But what do you say? uh, you can't like let it go, because I felt that it had the like people who've read, like who gave feedback, be it on Amazon reviews or even good friends, who would message and say like this has got a scope for like being converted into an OTT platform. And then at that point, I think we got an interest from a fairly known production house that was based out of Andheri West. I'm not going to say any names. But then what do you say? We thought whatever they offered was way below market standard. In the first go, even I was very tempted to what do you say take it to that offer, because I was like, okay, it's a film contract, why not take it? It's a fair production house. But then again, the whole point is, if I had taken up that this thing, that's the market rate I set for the series, which is a problem, and which is way below market rate. Plus, it won't be sustainable for me to do promote and everything else. So then obviously we said no, politely declined that offer. And then obviously at that point of time I was staying in Bombay. I was staying in this beautiful place called Andheri West, in the same lane which had production houses like Yashraj and what do you say, Balaji and everything else. I purposely moved to that side of town. And because it was COVID times and I had a lot of time, I what do you say went and tried to get a copy of the script and send it back to to whoever out there. Of course, I never went beyond the gates of any of these production houses. The security was the most important person I met at most of these places. That's when, after going a couple of times, did notice that when these security guards, when they get these packages, right, any packages, they don't obviously open or check. They see who it is addressed to and they deliver it. So then I went back to my drawing board. I just got like this nicely, got a good box designed and everything. Obviously branded it well enough. Had my book there, put in a couple of other whatever chocolates, assortments, whatever, blah blah, and got it nicely gift wrapped. Used LinkedIn, other tools, and a couple of friends, asked them to figure out who are the content acquisition people in OTTs and production houses. Found out the names of these people and made around 20 to 25 of these boxes and addressed to these people. And obviously I can't go and physically verify it every this thing, but so I went to the two production houses that were near my house and I checked. Yeah, I did notice this package also being received by security and goes to the right person. So the first barrier of entry was crossed there. And then I think in a span of 2.5 months later, from one of the production houses that I had reached out to, I got a call saying that okay, we've read this, we are interested in the process and everything else. So obviously, which is like bingo. I was thinking 25 boxes, one conversion, still worth it. So happy
Yeah,
about
that's
it.
good.
Yeah, still worth it. So then obviously that also it doesn't start there. So they obviously want to understand a lot more things. So they want to make commercial changes to it, multiple things. So the first conversation also, there were a lot of disagreements, like some sort of, they want to tone down the politics. The first person who reached out want to tone down the politics in that, which I understand, because there is a point of time when there was a web series called Tandav that released or something, and it had a huge what do you say problem among the public. People were boycotting it. There were legal notices sent to the OTT, so people were steering clear from political thrillers specifically. So I mean, honestly, I didn't think there was anything controversial in mind, so I just thought let's hold it out. And thankfully, in a couple of weeks later, we got a call from another production house who seemed more interested, who had a history of doing something similar, who had a couple of good films which did well. And with them, we went for a discussion, and they were mostly fine with it. And how the process goes is once you agree to all terms, they basically sign something called an option rights, which is for a year. That option right is basically they pay you a small amount of money for the option rights. It just means that they've blocked your book uh, to not be taken up by any other production house in that meantime. That's the only thing that option rights means. And that's the period where they evaluate the market potential of your content to go into it. And after 1 year, if what do you say, the deal works out, they sign the full book rights agreement. And if it does not work out, then obviously they cancel the agreement. Thankfully, a month before it completed a year, they were fine. The market research is fine, and they signed the book rights agreement, and of course for the first book, and clauses for the second and third one also. So that seemed like a good deal, because it's a series, right? So they were okay with the whole this thing. So I think that worked out. But yeah, it's all about trying and testing out things, and maybe doing some weird things like sending gift wrap boxes to production houses. But I think it works.
But that's really good to know. I mean, who would have thought, no, that you could actually market it? Usually, you have to know somebody to be introduced. But this, so when is this expected? The any idea
Uh,
about when we can look forward to the web series?
what I was told is 2024 national election time again. It's a political thriller, so they look at those
Okay.
timings. So I told you before, as we speak, the scripting and everything is done, and a casting is done. Unfortunately, I can't say much about that, but the casting and everything is done. So I think they are in the pre-production phase. They're waiting for the shooting to start. Hopefully, touch wood soon. Yeah.
Okay, that is super exciting to see a book that you have written to come out in an OTT platform. Uh, One thing again, I'm going to go a bit tangentially or a little off what it's come in a good flow. Going back to what you said in your introduction about Azim Premji University being a very important part of your writing thing, you said that you started writing here. Can you tell us? I'm assuming there may be alumni who are watching this, who have been classmates for both of us. What exactly happened in the university that made you start writing?
I think experiences. I think like APU, the experiences that you get were like like nothing before, which I had an experience at his undergrad setup. So we obviously had opportunities to travel to various parts of India, engage with the communities there, have a real feel of like. So for me, as somebody who grew up in the Middle East and came to Chennai or then Bangalore, it was just a very superficial experience about India, the cities or whatever, and the rest of it is majorly through the travels or whatever we did. So at APU there were two three things which really helped. One is research, which I think the methodology, the way in which you could go into depths, the things you could access, the people you could talk to, that was really helpful. Like it opens up like otherwise you end up writing something very generic or generalist without really having much depth knowledge about it, which would be a very half baked thing. So ABU really helped from the research point of view, which is something which I really owe to college. Even right now, when I do this thing, I think about those papers and everything. Really, it makes sense. It gives you the multiple perspectives. Is one thing which I think I would not have had I not what do you say studied ABU. Then apart from that, of course, the opportunity we got, like in terms of doing these immersions, as it was called, and I don't know what it's called now, to go to, so tier 3 tier 4, that places, to understand the real life situations, the socioeconomic factors that impact their life, etc. So these things really add when you're doing, because most of my books are set in not set in major cities, barring just the uh, like the policy aspect of whatever happens in the book. Barring that, most of it is set in the heartlands of India. So hence, what you say, it was really helpful to understand what people are like, the language, the dialect, being sensitive, not really falling in the stereotypes of writing. Like it's very simple for you to like fall into a stereotype if you're writing about, say, a Calcutta, or if you write about a Kerala or anything. A lot of stereotypes that you were shown or you've read through, not to fall into that. And also being sensitive when you're talking about certain topics, be from any point of view, be it gender, be it from, what do you say, caste, all of the things which I address in bits and pieces in the book. So that was very helpful. And I think when you talk to people who are readers, or when you even talk to, what do you say, people who are evaluating, reviewing it, these are things when people, when they tell you, like, okay, you've got that part, you've got the gender politics of it, right, the caste, it makes, I mean, at least you feel like I probably wouldn't have had that sorted had it not been for AP. You would have probably been more generalist. And of course, great friends who you can always call and ask about things. I mean, like, of course, being in college itself, like, it was great fun. Like, you, apart from the classes, obviously what happens outside the classes also makes sense. And even now, to generally have a conversation with anybody about anything, it's really helpful. And probably a lot of them are working in way more interesting spaces than I am working in right now. I'm probably sitting and writing, but people are on the ground really doing some impactful work. So having the opportunity to talk to those people, I think that's brilliant. So yeah.
Yeah, there were some good times at the university.
Absolutely.
What is the so you've written short fiction, you've written non-fiction, in the sense you've written for columns, etc., and you've also written a crime or political thriller. So which was the hardest or the easiest, or how would you rate for your personal experience of writing? Which do you find is toughest? Which is easier to write?
uh I think what you say, like, So my favorite genre is not crime thriller. I think I mentioned that. I'm writing it again from a market point of view because I know that that'll sell. And now they've written like one, I have two in the pipeline. That makes sense for me. A difficult genre for me to write has been something in, I mean, what do you say, magic in the fiction space has been magic realism. I tried my shot at that with like a short story called The Legend of Birbal's Bull. I think it was not great at all, but the idea was just to try because it's a genre which I really absolutely loved. I think one or sometime I got really inspired after reading Animal Farm, and I thought like, wow, let me also try something. And I ended up doing something which was bad, but it's okay. It was not great. It sold well, which is because that is the marketing aspect, but the book wasn't great. The short story wasn't great, but that was hard for me. But apart from that, I think non-fiction genuinely is difficult to write because fiction, at least, you can create the world. You can, of course, weave in what is there, and what do you say, and twist it based on what you want to do. Of course, there are difficult aspects, but non-fiction is not easy because at the end of the day it involves a lot of risk. I think you will be able to say about that better. You There is a little more responsibility when you write that, I feel, and the amount of research required is probably multifolds as compared to writing fiction. So probably that. And I think the easiest thing to write is crime thrillers because I genuinely think it's, for me, I think it's just like, uh, for me it works well. I'm not saying it's easy to write that genre. I'm not all claiming that. That'll be very foolish of me to say that. For me, it's relatively easier to do that. It's easier to mark those deadlines and get those books out. So hence, yeah.
Okay, great. So I think we've got a few questions from the viewers. So
Sure.
let me just start with one of the first questions. It's is publishing in literary magazines better than publishing stories as a collection? And this is someone called Train the Trainer. So the name is not there, but yeah, that's the question. I mean,
Okay.
is
I think they're both different. I mean, collections. See, the literary magazines, the good thing is, there's already an established leadership. It's part of, I mean, your book probably gets more organic reach when you publish in literary magazines. There is a proper audience who read that kind of stuff that is there. So as a reader, you can get more, what do you say, your kind of writing gets more exposure with a literary magazine, and you can get like good amount of feedback. Listen, so that is great. Whereas from a collections point of view, that is usually like, seeing a published work as part of a collection of series, and your work being out there to be to be in bookstores, to be sold, is a different challenge altogether. So there you learn the commercial aspect of it. Like, you're also pushing to sell your book, you're also pushing to get that seen. So they both have their pros and cons. Like, I will just say that the writer in me would love the literary magazine. The marketer in me would love the collection of short stories that go in. So it's just that.
okay, that's I mean, good to know. I mean, interesting for me also to know the difference. I didn't really think so much about it, especially in the case of short stories. Now that there's a lot of discussion on Chat GPT, AI tools, and things like that.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we have is how can writers benefit from AI? And my question would be, should writers even be accessing AI? But yes.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, any tool that makes your life easier should be used. I don't think an AI, I don't think you should write your entire story using AI, because that would probably not be your style or whatever. So, hence, not that. But why not for research? Like, sometimes if the tool is obviously updated enough, I'm not going to take any names like ChatGPT or Bard or whatever you want to use. For research, it's definitely a good starting point. I won't say it's the end. This thing, it's almost using uh, like the basic sources. Say you'll get a couple of information, so that way I think it's useful from a research point of view. And maybe if you're starting off writing, you want to do a bit of grammar edits and everything, you could try out that platform. Like, I would not do a language edit on that, because I would prefer hiring a professional editor and doing it, because editing again in books is not just about the language aspect of it. There is narrative feedback that you get. There is, the factual, the loophole. If it's crime, it's loopholes. Everything has to be, what is it, checked into it. It can't be just the language somebody
Hmm.
edits. That's so. I would obviously go. I mean, I have an editor who works with me for my books who would give me feedback on these things. But definitely, you can use AI tools for research. Nothing taking it. And if you're writing something not commercial, if you're writing for a magazine, or if you're writing for purely non-commercial, I think it's great from a language edit point of view and things like that. So definitely can use for that. And sometimes if you have a writer's block or something and you're not able to, like, do something, and you really want inspiration, you could just use the tool to, like, ask you to spin something. Don't use it, or use it, that's up to you, whoever is doing it. But at least it'll help you get out of that block. Like, it's an interactive platform to, what do you say, get that done. Or the best thing is always talk to your best group of friends. They're way better than using a AI tool to get you feedback. But yeah, I'm just saying, whatever works. Sometimes late at 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to disturb anybody. Why not? ChatGPT can be your friend. So definitely.
So here's another question from Ayush Mukherjee.
Yeah.
How important is it to network with other writers or publishers? And do you look out for opportunities like this?
Uh, Networking is great. I mean, see, I there are two points of view in this. Of course, what do you say? When you're networking, I mean, I would probably try to network with publishers, agents, and more than them, I would look at, if I could find distributors, bookstore people, the kind of people who have that final connect with the end user, or the bookstore, the reader who's reading it. It's good to have tie-ups with writers, because you could collaborate and come up with, what do you say, multiple things. Like, for example, what do you say, if you there are a lot of, in today's time, a lot of these authors like Ravi Subramaniam, or I think Nashwin Sanghi, they co-write with first time authors. They come up with these short books, novellas, or whatever. They do that. It's good for the, I mean, of course, it's good for the senior author also, because that person obviously is trying out, or, like, experimenting new genre which they would not do based on the deadlines and everything they have. And for the first timer who's starting out, you get a larger reach, because there is a marketing umbrella that you get of that author. So it's definitely fine. But for me, matlab, like, I would prefer rather being in book fairs, or, like, literary events and book festivals, where you get to meet a lot more readers. Because at the end of the day, matlab, you can, of course, writing feedback is one thing, but you also understand, like, what that market is reading right now, what are they looking for. I mean, like, there is a possibility that the kind of things that you're speaking about, the kind of style that you're writing, can get outdated as early as 1 or 2 years. So those insights are really helpful when you interact with readers. And yeah, definitely networking events are important. But then there is a flip side. And in all honesty, you know people look forward to a brand when that brand is scarcely available also. So if you're putting yourself out there completely and making yourself completely available, while that's a good what do you say, interaction, this thing, from in a commercial point of view, like, people just know too much, or people just, you're easily accessible, so they might feel it's easier to, like, get your book in a library, or just get your book from a, what do you say, a second-hand bookstore. So sometimes you have to have that balance of making yourself completely available versus, like, keeping your brand a little bit mysterious, because that helps if people not know too much about you. I think, again, I'm speaking more like a marketer right now than a writer. So yes.
Yeah, I think this series by Elena Ferrante was so popular because one of the reasons is that nobody knew who had written those series of books. My Brilliant Friend, and nobody really knew who was the author was.
Yeah.
But coming back to your book, Nobody Likes an Outsider. So the main characters, Johan Teitler, Illa Qureshi, and Sukumar Aragu.
Yeah.
I was reading it and I found the dynamic between Johan and Sukumar, whom he calls Anna, very
Yeah.
interesting. So, is this a reflection of? Is this something that is you have studied in Chennai? You lived in Delhi. So, is was the were the characters a result of your experiences, or how did you
Yeah,
come
I
up with?
mean, in a sense, yeah. I mean, like, it's like, for example, like, it was difficult for me to choose a character just from one part of India. Like, I love Chennai as much as I love Delhi, or same with any other part, like, which I've traveled. So for me, Sukumar was basically a part of what do you say a part of the things that I enjoyed or like being Chennai probably was stuffed into Sukumar, but he's still somebody who's working with the CBI team based out of Delhi. So and who basically like I don't believe in making my lead character really perfect. Like Johan may be the lead character or whatever of sorts, but there are some things that he's ignorant about. Say
Hmm.
Sukumar, like it's okay to call that out, right? It's you don't your characters don't have to be perfect in that sense. Same with Ela. Even Sukumar has his problems. It was just that, like, just trying to use a bit of those things to, like, quash the usual stereotypes, but also a bit of comic relief and, like, just trying to, like, have a good camaraderie. Because then, when because in my head, I always thought like these characters will be recurring in the next couple of books. So a bit of likability for a certain character would really help, because people then when the second time they pick up a book, somebody's read the first book, they know that this person is like this. So I don't have to try really hard to make that person very funny. So there is a general the tone of voice of that person is already in the mind of the reader. So that helps. So possibly that.
Because there were several questions which we received from registered those who wanted to view this. Was one of this is how much of your personal experiences make their way into the book that you write. So it's good to know. It was in that context that kind of asked
I
this
haven't
question.
I haven't murdered anybody, so definitely that's not the
Yeah.
that's
You have just given away one little tidbit, but never mind.
yeah, I'm not having more than anybody, so that's not it. But yeah, I think personal experiences happen, right? Like uh,
Yeah.
you can't take that out of you. You have to filter a lot of your opinion if possible, because sometimes you could be biased yourself. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's an
Uh,
important part.
one of the questions being asked is, will we see you in the OTT series?
This is some friend of mine, definitely. I'm sure. I that's
Okay.
not the business I'm in. No, probably
Okay.
that friend who asked this will be featured. You never know.
Uh, we have one more question. So this is from Vidya, who's asking. Uh, the I guess one of the biggest challenges is, and you've sort of answered, that is, how can you be a full-time writer and kind of make so can you just tell us about maybe the economics of royalties and publishing? How does that work? Because you've answered the question about mainly about whether you can be a full-time writer or not,
What
but
is
could
what
you,
is specific question? Sorry,
this
what is the specific
question
question?
is, being a full-time writer, the one of the biggest challenges is, how do you survive? How do
Okay.
you ensure that you get a return on the time and effort that you have put in? How many books does one need to write to be a if you want to be a full-time writer?
Okay. I don't think it's the number of books, honestly. Okay. First of all, like I think the beginning, like I said, like to be a full-time writer, it's a process that you take up where you have to also build your profile and your brand on the go. To understand that, I'll just like Seema, you asked, I'll touch upon the economics, so probably that'll
Yeah.
help the answer. So I mean, I'll speak more from a traditional publishing route and not self or hybrid. I have no experience in self and hybrid. From a traditional point of view, what do you say? What happens is once your book gets approved, you get like as a first time author, you get like a decent enough advance that could anywhere range between as small as 75 lakhs to somewhere it can go up to 3 lakhs or for a first time author. I'm giving out numbers based on what I know in the industry. To 3 lakhs it can happen. So after that, then there is a royalties that you get for the per book wala thing that happens. As a first time author, your royalties, again, I'm giving a larger range because it differs from publishers to publishers, could be anywhere from 5% to 11%, can be the what do you say range you get in terms of royalty. Personal experience, what I did is, like, I struck a deal with my publisher saying that advance round is great. For the royalty bit of it, I just said that, like, because as a first time author, nobody expects you to sell more than 1,000 books, let's be honest, or like
Hmm.
500 copies. So I said, for the first 1,000 books, you can give me a royalty of 5 to something percentage. But once the book crosses the 1,000th one, I want a royalty of 10%. And once it crosses 3,000 plus, I want a royalty of 12%. So, which seemed like a good deal for the publisher also, which means that from the publisher's point of view, that shows that the author is willing to put in their effort, and I'm only being compensated for the fact that I am selling as many number of copies. So that works. And to be a full-time writer, like the person asked, what do you say? So obviously, it's not about getting the number of books, but it's about like having your books function and reach the market as much. So if you're able to like hit these numbers, then definitely you'll be able to hit your targets. It's about that. But of course, you can have one or two matlab books in a year. It's not a problem. But then I can understand that when the more people are looking forward to your books, the lesser frequency, the better, so that your book has a better pickup. And it's always good to like create something. I mean, fiction at least, it's always good to create something in what do you say, in terms of like series or something, because then you're building a readership over a time, and then there'll be recurring readers who come in. So that kind of stuff helps. So it is possible to be a full-time author, but just that you have to be patient and build your brand on the go.
Okay, thanks, Fawaz. I guess there are really no more questions at this point that we have, and we've tried to cover almost all the questions that were sent to us by the registered user. So that's in this conversation. So thank you again. Thank you very much for joining us for the alumni webinar at the university. And I hope that the people who are hoping to write, those suffering from writer's blocks, those who are wondering whether they can support themselves through writing, and also figuring out how to go about the process of publishing, or even sending gift boxes to the potential producers. Hope you'll have got a lot of tips on how to go about this from Fawaz. Any last words, Fawaz, you want to share? Or
I mean, nothing specific, but like I always say, like so book was called Nobody Likes an Outsider. I consider myself an outsider, and so I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, and somebody needs. I mean, I'm happy to help anybody who wants to get started in that way, like right from like in case somebody wants to understand how to get certain things done, or like how to get in touch with a literary agent or stuff. Of course, this is my alma mater, so I'm happy to do that. So you can reach out to me via email or via Instagram or Facebook or whatever channels. Happy to do that. So yeah, that's pretty much about it.
thank you. Then thanks a lot, Fawaz, for today, and all the best with your next novel
To you,
and series.
Seema, good luck with your upcoming book also.
Thank you.
People who are listening, Seema has a release in September, if I'm right.
Yes, hopefully in September. It's non-fiction on water.
Amazing. So
With
good luck
Prem.
with that, Seema.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. It was great.